Testing 1, 2, 3, guys. Testing 1, 2, 3. Yo, what's up? Welcome to Vencabot. Something a little bit different action. My name is David. Guys, tonight we're talking about resolution in 3D games in particular. So some of you guys know what resolution means. Some of you guys might not even know what that means, which is perfectly fine. There's a whole spectrum of nerdiness. Basically, we're talking about the number of dots on screen that can represent a game. And I think that even of those that understand the basics of resolution really appreciate it more in terms of sprite work. They appreciate it in terms of what it means for two-dimensional games, right? Like Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario and that sort of thing. But it's actually maybe even more profound in 3D games. It's a little bit less understood, I feel like. This is Ocarina of Time on the N64. It's a game we played through recently all the way through. I fucking enjoyed it immensely. And we're playing it right now at the N64's native resolution. So the actual hardware of an N64 back in the year 1998 was outputting the game to your TV at this resolution. And it looks a little bit weird, right, by our modern standards. It looks kind of sparkly, kind of like there's some pretty big blocks. Let's get into the game and have a look at it. Kind of wiggly is this tone box. Yeah, let's launch the game here. It's our completed playthrough. So this is what a game looks like at the resolution of its time, in this case, 1998 N64. The lines kind of wiggle. In particular, if I can get up to a wall here, we can see that there are a lot of little squares. Everything is made up of a bunch of little squares, and that is what a pixel is. It's a little square of graphical data. If I were to face away from the wall, and then turn into it, we can see that, for instance, Link's glove there, his hat, we can see like what's called stair-stepping, or staircasing, where the diagonal lines of his shape have this blocky effect to them. We can see like little stair steps, right? That's because there's only so many squares they can use to express a diagonal line. Right? So that's kind of interesting. So this was the way the game looked on the hardware level of its day inside of the machine. And I make a point of that because this is not how we played games back in the day. And Katie knows this, whereas Mutant knows this. A lot of you guys know this. But some of you guys are literally so young that you haven't really played a whole bunch of 3D games on a CRT. And I think that there's this kind of push in the indie scene to express games as, you know, low res without appreciation for the fact that that's not how games looked back in the day. It's a fun look back at classical graphics, but it's not really how we enjoyed them. In fact, we had CRT televisions that kind of softened the image through scan lines and luminescence, such that a lot of the stair-stepping becomes invisible. So let's demonstrate that now. So again, this is how the game looks at low res. But I'm young at heart, dude. I'm young at heart. Let's go to town here a little bit, actually. So we know that in this game, there's a mix of 2D and 3D graphics. Link and the other characters are 3D polygons, but backgrounds like in town here are actually textures. In fact, you know what I want to do? I want to go become a child. Before I do though, I want to point out, look at Link there in the middle of the screen, in the middle left. You can't see anything about him, right? He is just a mass of pixels with pretty much no detail left because he is so far from the camera that there's just not enough pixels to go around to express his character model. It's just a block of pixels now, which kind of sucks, but it's, you know, it's a limitation of the time. He's an amorphous blob of color, right? I'm gonna go be a child Link and look around in the town square where there's a lot of sprite work being done. So to repeat myself here, this is the game running at its native resolution on a modern display, where we can see every individual pixel because of how our modern displays kind of show pixels. Look at these the sort of blurriness and blockiness here, right? The stair-stepping going on in his hair there. It's all a bunch of little squares, which to some is going to look great, especially in the year 2030. We're going to see this come back as an aesthetic. You can quote me on that. It's already coming back as an aesthetic, sort of, in indie games. But yeah, this is not the way games looked to us back in the day because of CRTs. But in any case, this is what the way the games have always looked inside of the console. This is the signal that was sent to our TVs back in '98, which our televisions would soften. But modern TVs don't do that, so we see all this blockiness, which is cool. So again, that background there, that church is a sprite. It's not actually 3D. It's a drawing. Link is a sprite. Link is a character model. There's a 3D character. And again, see, very little detail. He's so far from the camera. Very little detail, right? You can hardly make out what he is. Here's the town. Again, The 3D characters really suffer because there's not enough pixels on screen to render their lines separate from one another, the lines of their polygons. So they're sort of kind of like blobs. And likewise, you can see in the mask shop on the left and the shop on the right that you can see the blackness in the sprites as well. Right? That's all well and good. But now, as Katie points out, this is why games like 3DS in particular have options for scan lines. So now we're going to enable a CRT emulation to show what it looked like on a TV of the day. And I want to point out just how dramatic the difference is here. So I'm going to walk around Town Square a bit, show you the backgrounds here, the sprites. See that building back there? Very blurry, very blocky. Look at all the stair-stepping on that building right there. All the little squares popping out. Lots and lots of little squares everywhere. Because again, these are little pixels we can see very clearly now. He's a blob of pixels. She's a blob of pixels there. Link's a blob of pixels right now. No detail. But this game's graphics were literally engineered in '98 to be shown on a CRT, and to take advantage of a CRT's natural blurring properties to make the game look a little bit better. Okay, so once again here we have some sprite work. That buildings are all sprites right now. Let's turn on a CRT filter and see how it impacts the way the game looks. I'm sorry, Apples, we found the last heart piece. Yes, it was on the road to Lake Hylia under a Stone of Agony spot. Going to my shaders here, loading a preset that I created to emulate a CRT. Okay, so this is what games actually looked on TVs back in the day. So right away in that building on the left, you can see that a lot of the jagginess has been totally smoothed out. Right? Let's go back to the town square. Now, if you look at, for instance, the armor shop, the potion shop, the mask shop, the church, a lot of their blockiness has been smoothed by the scan lines. And likewise, although these characters in the background, including Link and that woman there and the girl and the chicken, although they are no higher detail at all, and although they do appear sort of like a colorful smudge, the fact that the sharpness has been lowered means that our eyes are less distracted by the individual squares, which makes their shapes more parsable overall. So again, even though they are still just a kind of a mass of color, the fact that they're not as sharp on a per pixel basis allows our minds to interpret their shapes, more like human shapes. In this case, cartoon characters, right? Let's go look at the way Link runs around, for instance, right? This is the way games look. This is the way the game looked on TVs back in the day. This is how we played it. That church back there, again, it's night and day. The scan lines turned on, that's a sprite back there, it's a two-dimensional graphic. And the scan lines and the inherent blurring of a CRT makes the softness, it makes the shapes, the contours of that building much more apparent to us because we're not so distracted by the little squares everywhere. Even though, again, Link being so far from the camera is still impossible to make out much detail in. But it feels more like you're looking through a blurry pair of glasses than if you're looking at a pile of pixels. Now, I pointed this out because I want to show off the way that most of us these days play three-dimensional games on emulator, which is through upscaled graphics. And the reason I want to do this is because I feel like it's very profound. I feel like not a lot of people, even that love emulation, appreciate just how much more beautiful games are now than they were on emulators, right? People tend to think about how, if you see this game, for instance, right, compared to a PS4 game, you see a lot of very sharp polygons. You're like, oh, that game look like ass, right? It's very polygonal. There's a lot of, Link's nose, right? It's a very pointy nose. It's not like you'd see in a modern game. But what's interesting is that when you raise the internal resolution of an emulator, even though the polygons are still very sharp and jagged, right, the actual, the three-dimensional polygons, like Link's nose, for instance, right? They're still very jagged. But because you don't have the stair-stepping effect, or, the stair-stepping effect of the internal resolution, and the blurriness of the CRT, right now we're blurring it, right? Which makes it look very smooth, relatively speaking, that is. And relatively nice. Let's once again remove the CRT filter. Right? So now we have the sharp pixels again. And again, you can see, you know, more accurate colors now, and you can see, you know, every individual pixel, which is our kind of our fetish these days for retro aesthetics. But the especially in 3D games, the sharpness of each pixel distracts from the form of a 3D object, which makes it kind of hard to read what it is. So CRTs help a lot in that respect. But I want to stress that once you use the default graphical plugin in your 3D emulator of choice, it's going to almost always upscale the internal resolution, which means that although the 3D shapes, like this platform here, or if I go over to this these stones, they're still going to be, again, very sharp polygons. But because they don't have that stair-stepping effect, I want to stress that it allows you to see much more texture detail, much more clearly, which is something I think not a lot of players appreciate. So let's do that now. So let's put Link right about here and look at the camera. Look at him. Look at that beautiful boy. Look at the camera, like this. See him? Keep that image in your mind. Let's go and kill this emulator right now. Close content. And let's go and change our video driver here to GL. I'm sorry, I did it in the wrong order. We have to go to the video drivers. I have to do this again. Go back to Vulkan. Go to our history, reload this game. I have to change the plugin first. So what we were just looking at was the Parallel plugin, which is a new plugin that has nearly 100% graphical accuracy to the actual N64, which is beautiful. Shout out to all the hackers out there that do this work for free for us, by the way. Shout out to them. That's really impressive. Let's go down here to our graphical plugin and change this to Auto, which is going to be Glide 64. That's what it defaults to when you put it to Auto. It's one of the longest running graphical plugins for N64. It's highly, highly accurate, but not completely accurate. Let's close the content now. Now go change our video driver to GL and relaunch Zelda. Now this is the way that we usually enjoy N64 emulation these days, in any 3D old console, whether it be PS1, PS2, whatever. This is the game with upscaled graphics. And the effect is that the polygons are just as sharp as were before. Let's go back and look at this thing, for instance. Right? So these things don't have any more polygons. They are still sharp and pointy as fuck. But because we have more pixels on screen to work with in terms of, you know, individual dots, it means that our view of the 3D models is not clustered up with big fat dots. Instead, we can see much finer detail, which is profoundly interesting. I think that not enough people appreciate this. For instance, if I stand here now and look back at the camera, you can see Link's eyes. You can see him blinking. You see him fucking blinking from this far away? Look at that blink. Look at him blinking. Okay, that's simply something that we could not see back in the day. Yeah, exactly, Mutant. It doesn't look all weird when I run. Like, check forward's not like all like stair-stepping all over the place. Let me go back outside. I'm gonna go be a child again here. And it's that very subtle detail, for instance, that you can see Link blink, that demonstrates how, in a 3D game, again, much more than a 2D game, look at his eyes here, for instance, right? We could not see his mouth open like that as clearly when he goes, hey! Because our view of textures that were literally programmed into the game, you know, in Japan, in '98, they put a lot of work into, hoping that we would see them when we did this, right? They're put into the game so that we could do this, and then do this, right? That's why he has a face like that. But on modern consoles, or say modern PCs, with emulation that upscales the graphics, we can see those same details from very far away. As far as this, we can still see his eyes perfectly. And if I step outside, remember how outside the temple, the camera's pulled so far back, we could barely even make Link out at all? He was just a pile of pixels, right? We kind of made a point made a note to point that out. Here, look how far away I am. You can still see him fucking blink. You can still see his belt, the belt buckle, right? You can see his animations very subtly where he kicks his shoe on the floor. You can see the detail very subtly from very far away. Right here, it's got a little effect there with the lighting, but you can see every detail of his animation from this far away. And it's that difference that I think players of retro games on modern emulation platforms should appreciate, Not only because it's a luxury, but because as someone like me who loved these games growing up, it gives you a reason to replay games again that you might have loved as a kid. Not because it's the most authentic way, which I think is a worthwhile virtue that a lot of my friends chase after, and I appreciate that. Playing games on their classic hardware to get the most authentic experience is very important, but because you can see things that you could never see before, that developers put into the game. It was intended to be seen. It was put in there for a reason to make the game more beautiful, more lush, more detailed, but that TVs at the time could not render, and likewise the console itself could not render them at a distance. So games like this, look at the tree, right? I can see the bark of the tree from this far away, whereas on an actual N64, there was no chance you could make out those details in the bark from, where the camera was positioned. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be allowed to. It means that authentically, if you want to chase after the classic experience, you're not going to see that, which is perfectly fine. There are, of course, advantages to playing games authentically as well. But there are perks to playing games, 3D games especially, with upscaled graphics that I think not enough's being said about. Like, I can see every step of those stairs from this far away, which means that I can parse that from further as being a staircase, which adds to my immersion as a player. Mutant says, this is why mods like DCHMI are so sought after. Exactly, Mutant. Exactly. Because the detail is in those consoles. The detail is in the game. They programmed them in. But to actually unleash those details that were programmed in, decades ago, sometimes you need to power up your rig. And I do want to stress that I love playing games in as authentic a manner as possible. I have a CRT. Before I was a streamer, I would play games on there all the time. I'm a game collector. I like to play retro games on a CRT with the actual controller in my hand, the actual console's controller. I'm playing this right now on a PS4 controller. It's not like playing it on a CRT with a N64 controller in my hand. It's kind of different in that respect. But I do want to stress that there are virtues to playing, especially 3D games from this era, on modern systems through emulation. You can really appreciate details like that wall over there, the stone bricks, that you just really can appreciate the same way in their time. I noticed this growing up as a teenager emulating when I played Mega Man Legends on PS1 with upscaled 3D graphics, because that game has an anime aesthetic, and a lot of the facial features and the subtlety, and these things are so important for getting into the game. They were definitely negatively impacted by the limitations of the PS1. And playing them now on an emulator, you can really appreciate the aesthetic a lot more. You can see so much more detail in the environments. This game is no exception. You can see so much more when you emulate it at high resolution. Yeah, they had to wait for display time to catch up. Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So you started out talking about resolution. What resolution do you have this set at? This is at higher than 1080p. So as long as I was kind of in the rant there. I think I made my point. But you asked an interesting question, Brian. So it's to get the highest detail possible. It's important to render games at the native resolution of your monitor. In my case, that's 1080p. But what's also interesting, if we're talking about resolution, is that nowadays you can actually render retro games, especially, at a higher resolution than your monitor actually can display. And then RetroArch will shrink that down to your display resolution. And the advantage of that is that even the very minor stair-stepping of these extremely tiny pixels on your monitor is impacted positively, because when you shrink them down from a high resolution, it has a natural anti-aliasing effect. Whereas other other popular anti-aliasers like FXAA and MXAA and that sort of thing, they're programmed to blur the image slightly to kind of make edges seem less stair-steppy. Whereas when you what's called super scale graphic, by raising the resolution higher than display and then shrinking it back down again, it has the natural effect of compressing away those sharp edges without actually blurring the picture. Exactly, Tonebox. It's super scaled down. The actual game, yes. So I render 3D games like this at, let me check. I wonder if I might actually lower this to 1080p for performance reasons. I may have. Let's see here. Yeah, so this actually is at 1080p. I apologize for this confusion. But most of the time, it's because this emulator is kind of slow. But most of the time, I will actually upscale them and then downscale them back down to eliminate some of the stair stepping. So I know that the reason I did that for this game is it's kind of performance heavy. If I were to, let's say, close this content and load up, let's see here, Mario 64. which is a game that I know I can run better on this rig. I usually play this game upscaled, super scaled down. So here you can see a little bit of stair stepping. Again, very, very minor. Again, you have to lean in pretty close. Even on a stream, you might not be able to make it out. But because, you know, even on a 1080p screen, there is a ton of very small dots. Right? And there is a very minor effect of stepping because of that. But you can eliminate that somewhat by going to your graphical settings in your emulator and literally pumping the resolution higher than your display can receive. Right? So we'll do it like, right there, I guess. Then I'm going to restart the emulator here.
It's me, Mario.
And this will reduce stair stepping even at native resolution.
Hello.
Makes things appear, makes edges appear a little bit softer. I love this game. Good excuse to the castle jump. So this is another good, while I'm doing this little rant here, guys, this is a good reason, a good time for me to do one more run through, a little walk back. Oh, thank you, Brian. Yeah, keep what I'm doing. Yeah, it's different for every emulator, of course. So here's a good example of a situation where, again, the increased resolution of the emulator allows you to see more detail in Mario's shape and the distant shapes than you would have seen in its time. Like the birds, for instance. No, Katie, what happens is they scale the graphics of the game, like the way that they're rendered at a high resolution, and then before they hit your monitor, they're shrunk back down. So you're not bypassing your monitor's resolution. Instead, you're asking the game to spit out its pixels at a very high resolution, and then they get shrunk down to show to your monitor. So now let me demonstrate again. Now you've seen this, and this is people that play this game nowadays on stream. You guys watch like Mario 64 streams. You're used to seeing this. This is the way we understand the game to look now, right? This is the way we appreciate it now. But let's take a moment to appreciate how different this is from how we played it back in the year 1996 or whatever. Let's go to our options and change our plugin here back to parallel, which again, this one's much more accurate. Close the content here. We're going to go to make that work, you have to go to your driver settings and put on Vulkan. Doesn't work on GL. This is the way that games look, again, internally at their native res. Wow, what a difference already.
Hello.
Look at this. Let's play the game.
Okie dokie.
All right, this is the way that the game looks internally on an actual N64 on a modern display. Okay. But if we put the CRT on, again, it will do a lot to smooth this down to make it appear more like we actually played it back in the day. That's not how games looked back in the day to our eyes. That's how they looked, again, on the inside of the N64. But by the time they actually hit our eyes through a CRT screen, they looked like this, which greatly softens the edges. But again, you lose the detail, right? So now you don't see a lot of that stair stepping going on as badly, but you also lose that long-range detail. This is the way the game actually looked to us back in the day. So again, I can't see the details in the butterflies, right? I can't see the way their pattern is on their wings from here. I kind of can. But if we were running it at a high res through the emulator's default plugin, we could see so much more detail. Again, some developer programmed that in so I could see it like this. That's why they have that detail on there, because I'm close to them now. But on a monitor display, we can appreciate that detail from way further away, which is it's much more immersive. I'm sorry for missing the chat here, guys. I'm going on a little rant. Steve says, well, now I know why WoW has the option to move resolution to scale to 200% exactly. Yes. So there's no netplay mutant? No, I wish there was. If there was netplay on N64, we would be playing the fuck out of Bomberman. We have to use Parsec for that. Some other kind of third-party resource. I want to do that one day, but it's going to be a little bit of setting up. And, Dix points out, most modern computer games allow you to superscale in their settings. You can set the resolution to way higher than your monitor would normally accept. But Katie's not huge into like modern PC games. I'm not surprised that he wouldn't have heard of it. I only recently heard of it myself. It's very new to me as a console gamer and someone who doesn't play a lot of modern PC games. But yeah, in the case of emulation, that's what's happening. You can set the resolution to higher than your screen can actually accept. And by shrinking it back down, it acts as a natural and a totally crisp anti-aliaser. So if you you know, want to anti-alias your games in the most natural way, and you have the performance overhead to do it, I recommend super scaling way over something like MXAA. GoldenEye or Mario Kart. Yeah, that'd be fun. Keith says Parsec's not that great. I think that, you know, for this purpose, it could be worth trying. I heard a lot of good things about it. I think for a lot of these games, it wouldn't be the end of the world to have a little bit of input delay. But yeah, it's kind of a shame. Tone says, yeah, the first time I set a PS4 game res to source, huh? Anyway, so there was one thing I wanted to say as a sort of in closing. I think I'm pretty satisfied with that rant. In any case, yeah, so resolution is super interesting for 3D games, even more than 2D games. Because in 2D games, the sprite work is done to register, to appear correctly on a CRT. And no amount of upscaling will increase the number of pixels in a sprite. That's true of any two-dimensional game, right? So if you increase the res on a sprite-based game, all you get is sharper pixels, which to some is very important. I love sharp pixels in my retro games. But again, I think not enough's being said about how important it is to upscale your 3D games, because it allows you to see finer detail from further away. And, you know, it's just fascinating to me that a lot of kids that are growing up, you know, they're young people, they're teenagers right now, that watch their streams of, you know, Mario. This game, of course, is timeless. You know, they don't really appreciate that games looked so different in our time. It's the same exact game, but because we have much less detail, again, the immersion is totally different. In some cases for the better, in some cases for the worst. My friend Brian told me today that the Glide plugin, which is, you know, the upscale plugin, the high-res plugin, has some bugs with Majora's Mask. So we may end up playing Majora's Mask like this in CRT emulation to make it more accurate. Let's do Castle Jump, guys. J-Bum says, please, Venca, before you end this Mario bit, can you run down the metal Mario hole, huh? Please. We'll do that first, then we'll end on a Castle Jump, my favorite. If you guys have watched our N64 streams of the game, you guys know, this game I mean, you know that as a kid, I was fascinated by the castle jump. It was a mythical thing before YouTube existed, where some would say that you could jump to the top of the castle without needing Yoshi. Right? It was like this legend. And because there was literally no video back then online, all you had were descriptions of how to do it. And so we would read about how it was like, oh yeah, you have to run along the edge of the hill, and then hop, and then bounce your second jump off the side of the hill, kick off, and then butt slide, and then you can get to the top of the castle. And me and my brother tried so many times to do this, and weren't able to make it work. And many years later as an adult, I finally figured it out. And now whenever I play this game, I can't help but do it. It is so satisfying. This ain't gonna work. Oh, it just barely worked, man. I always end a stream of this game with a castle jump. That's my prerogative, Bobby Brown. Thanks for hanging out tonight, guys. Again, tonight was a kind of an unusual stream, no face cam. A little bit ranty. It's a pleasure having you guys here. Let's castle. I only have 71 stars right now. Normally, I would not be able to get to the top of the castle. If you guys don't know this game, once you get all 120 stars, you unlock a cannon. And the cannon shoots you to the top of the castle, which allows you to meet Yoshi up there, and as well as collect some lives, do some cool post-game stuff. Here's the cannon that will open up. Right now it teases you by being unlocked. And it's a relatively little-known fact that you can sort of... There's a jump you can do, a very precise jump, that can get you to the top of the castle before you can do that. You're not supposed to be able to do this. But the developers didn't realize that players would figure this out. It works kind of like this. See if I can nail it. I messed it up. Let's try it again. Goon gets Steve. Rest well, my friend. Classic Vencabot stream. No progress off the rants. That sounds canon. That's exactly how we do it here. Alright, can I pull the camera back? Sure I can. Gotta jump right into that corner. There we go. Whee! So now you can see the top of the castle way before you're supposed to. Yoshi is not up here because his flag has not been set yet, which is kind of disappointing. It'd be cool if Yoshi was always up here, but it only appears once you have all the stars. But you can do all kinds of fun stuff up here. You can get those lives. You can go to the black room glitch. I always show the black room glitch whenever I do this stream. I always can't help it. Because again, it's one of the things as a kid that fascinated me. If you go over here with the hat, you can do a sort of a glitchy jump to get through here. 2, 1. How does it work? 1, 2. No, it doesn't work that way. Do I have to fly from somewhere? Oh, I have to do a sideways jump, I think, like this. Like. Yes, okay. Pull sharply this way. So sharp. There we go. Okay, so now I can go over to the front. And you can glitch. Oh, no, fuck, hit the wrong button. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Face a little bit this way. 1, 2, 3. Fuck. Yeah, I should have hit Z there. The Z maybe fall off. Let's try it again. If you angle just right, you can trick the game into thinking that you're not on that slope. It's the funnest thing to do, J-Bam. I love doing the fucking castle jump. So you gotta get up here. You gotta angle yourself. Fuck, don't hit Z. Fuck! How am I hitting Z? Oh, because I'm playing Zelda in my head. Z is how you center the camera. That's why I'm hitting Z. I gotta let this wear off now so I can do my triple jump up there. So basically, back in the early days of the N64 and this game, there was a rumor about this alternate dimension you can get Mario trapped in. This is before we had any idea about 3D graphics and being out of bounds. No one had been out of bounds in pretty much any game at that point, so no one knew what that was, but there's a creepypasta basically about the dark room. You can trap Mario in this bizarre black space. This is a way to get out of bounds. I'm going to demonstrate it and then end the stream. So the triple jump, the way it works is you do a run here along the seam of the hill. You do your first jump and land your first jump right in this corner. Then you second jump out of the corner onto that hill, triple jump off the hill, butt slide to the left, and then jump, and that's how you get up there. That's really all there is to it. Fuck. Okay, I'm trying to center my camera. You do that in this game? There's a way to do that, right? Yes? No? How do you center the camera in this game? Anyway, do it like this. Just like that. Alright, so to get to the black room, as it was called in the 90s, again, you gotta get the feather hat, and you can't triple jump on this slope, unless, oh fuck, once again I hit the fucking, God, I hit the Z button to fucking center the camera. Isn't there a way to do that in this game? How does it work? Maybe there's not, you just gotta wait. Ah, thank you, Tonebox, yes, the left and right C buttons, thank you. Left and right C buttons, so you turn it. Thank you, Tonebox, you're right. I will jump, Jeff, I'm gonna check the Discord. So I don't think I can do this. Well, maybe I can, probably not though. No, I need to be able to triple jump. Without with the hat on, you don't get a real triple jump. Okay. Oops, I'm just gonna try to center it and I get in a crouch. So now you go here and do this way, not like this. There you go. Okay. Alright. So first you get up here, don't center it, do it like this. There you go. Back in there. Alright, here we go. What's the angle? You gotta do it like down the hill, basically. There we go. Okay, pull it in. Okay, now don't fucking Z button. So now all you gotta do is you gotta go up here, and you gotta run into this fucking wall repeatedly. There's like a little window up there, basically. You gotta jump into that window. This is the right side. Oh, fuck! This is the right side, though. Okay. So all there is to it now is to just get a jump into the wall here. Actually, I don't know if you have to jump, actually. Maybe you can just run in. Fuck. There we go. Oh, I died! Fuck! That's the black room anyway, guys. I always show this on stream. That's something I love to do. There's a very cool property with the black room where the doors are programmed in a very bizarre way. Katie, you haven't seen the best part yet, dude. There's something about the black room that is something that is very interesting from a developer standpoint. Like, really interesting from a developer standpoint. I almost got up there having to grab the ledge. Alright. I think I've shown this to Brian before. Yeah, it's so good this game, but the movement is so good in this game. It's never been, for my money, it's never been improved upon. Oh, fuck! Crouch! Oh, I got saved there by the little lip there. Yeah, I'm still thinking Zelda controls. Okay, pull in, toit. Hoop! There we go. Okay, don't hit the Z button, use the stick. There we go. Okay, I can take this fall. Alright, so, here's what's cool about this. This right here. Alright. So, if you walk in the outside side of the door, you end up inside the castle, right? But if I walk through this side of the door, I end up on this side. Why in God's name? This is a very early 3D game. But why would they go through the trouble to actually make the side of the door you enter through significant the way that it is in real life? You would think that by opening the door, it would trigger a scene transition that would just put you inside the castle. That's the sensible way to do it. But instead, they made it so that if you walk in one side of the door, you come out the other side of the connected door. So if I came from outside the castle, I would end up inside the castle. But because I'm coming from this black room, if I walk through the door backwards, I come out of the door backwards. Which is where the creepypasta comes from. Back in the 90s on the web, people would be like, oh man, it's so creepy, you're trapped in here forever, it's alternate black dimension. Again, this is before we had, a knowledge of out of bounds. It's a very simple geometry bug. And also, I found out you're not trapped here. You can clip through the wall. It's kind of hard. You can do it right around here. Yeah, it's kind of tough without being able to see. Reminds me of how the underground map of Link's Awakening are all technically connected. Yeah, exactly, Tomebox. Like, why would they do it that way? Let me try and walk right here, and then walk through right here. There we go. So you can get out of there pretty easily. But yeah, so if I walk through this side of the door, he comes out the other side of the door. They programmed it so that, I guess the doors are like the same door, like they are in real life, and the side you go into is significant. That's just bizarre. And super dope. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Had a chance to talk about resolution, do some castle jumps. So 2.5. I'll see you guys tomorrow with some Bruise Day Tuesday Third Strike action. Until then, peace out. Have a good rest. Pleasure having you, dicks. Hope you have a chill evening. I know you always stay up mad late. Good night, Katie. Good night, Brian. Good night, Tomebox. Good night, J-Bomb, all you lurkers. Oh, fuck, I didn't get the butt slide there. Good night, guys. Do. Yeah, I'm trying to hit fucking center with Z. This is a right stick. This is more sensible than what you'd expect, what you got from Zelda. You treat the C buttons like a second stick. That's what we ended up going with years later. But I'm trained by Zelda to just tap Z button to center.
Ooh, interesting space.
Which really would not that solution.
Oh my god! That was so sick! What?
So yeah, guys, consider in the future if you're going to emulate, N64 or PS1 games especially, or even PS2 games or Wii games or GameCube games, take advantage of your video plugins upscaling features to scale the games to your monitor's native res at least, to really make the most of you know, the textures that were put into the game. And also keep in mind, if you're a younger person, that, you know, the sharp pixel, you know, retro aesthetic that it's associated with, you know, 8-bit artwork and 16-bit artwork, and even to an extent, you know, we're starting to see that in like low poly games.
Oh no!
It's you know, accurate insofar as we had a low resolution back then, but it's not accurate insofar as, you know, we didn't see the sharp pixels back in the day. And the CRT's properties do a lot to smooth out the pixels and make them appear, you know, more rounded, more softer, and that really helps with, you know, parsing the visuals, you know, mentally. Like seeing a distant stack of pixels in sharp pixels appears just like a bunch of sharp squares, but that same, you know, blob of pixels might be much more clearly recognized as a person with the CRT. Not just because, you know, I should say not because there's more detail, because there's really not. There is no more detail being added. But because once you take away that distraction of the sharp pixels, your mind can fill in the blanks a little bit more and kind of get a feel for what you're looking at. And if you're playing, you know, retro games on, you know, SNES or NES or Genesis, the sharp pixels let you see more fine detail, even in those games, than we saw back in the day. But also keep in mind that there's a sacrifice being made, because when you see those sharp pixels, it gives you an appreciation for like the, you know, the artisanship, the artwork. But you also lose some of that roundness that would have come from those pixels being softened. Likewise, you lose a lot of the, you know, color depth, because instead you see the dithering. When you have you know, a high-res display showing low-res graphics, you can see the dithering of each individual pixel. Whereas back in the day, those patterns were meant to make games appear to have greater color depth, because they took advantage of the smearing, the natural smearing of colors that are beside each other, to essentially make new colors. So I guess what I'm trying to say overall is that if you love retro games, consider playing your games both ways and the advantages of either way. Right? You can go for a more authentic experience, or you can go for an experience that might, you know, let you appreciate something you loved in childhood in a whole new way. There's a lot going on in that respect. And in the past, I've played games on this channel that are 3D at high res to appreciate the textures more. And it's kind of a shame that from Brian's reports, we're going to see Majora's Mask not have that advantage. We're going to have to probably play the game at, you know, the original resolution with a CRT emulation, which again, it's not the end of the world. It's how it's supposed to look.
I don't think that, you know.
But I'm kind of accustomed to, at least on stream especially, showing off a lot of the finer details that a lot of us kind of missed out on back in the 90s.
Rest in peace.
Well, Brian's issue, Dix, was that in Majora's Mask, which he's going to be playing along with us, you know, at home, the Glide plugin, which has, you know, the high-res graphics, let you see the textures better, it's buggy. It's buggy in that textures appear invisible, so you can see through walls and stuff, which is a problem we had in one area in Ocarina of Time. Apparently, it's more prevalent in Majora's Mask by Brian's estimation. And the issue there is that, you know, the Glide plugin, although it enhances the graphics, it's not as compatible with the actual N64, you know, graphical commands. Whereas this plugin Parallel, it is extremely compatible. It should render things perfectly, except that it has no feature to upscale the graphics. So we're going to be seeing that it's native res. Oh, fuck, I've really been fucking
You
up.
can't find a team, like a team for you.
I wonder if the actual texture isn't like thick. Yeah, I really wonder. That's not my area of expertise. Usually, as you pointed out earlier, Tonebox, that there are known bugs that occur with textures that are based on positioning. When you upscale a game's graphics, basically it causes rounding errors. Where if a game was meant to be shown, let's say at, you know, 800 by 400, if you try to scale the game to a resolution that doesn't scale perfectly with that, there's problems that occur with deciding exactly on what pixel to start a polygon. You have to round it. And that's been known to cause some pretty serious issues.
I seek Marcall, a necromancer. I would still even know how to grab a life. I am Marcall.
I'm really fucking up.
It's just
I'm gonna get one more before I call it.
what? I do not lie, sir. I am exactly
But that's usually a concern for 2D games more than
She has the
3D.
Karen haircut and everything.
I really have no idea why a texture would appear entirely invisible
Perhaps you are. It's hard to know who to trust.
in a game like that. If I had to guess, Tonebox, I think that it's due to culling. For instance, I noticed that in Ocarina of Time, the one place we had the problem in a big way was at Death Mountain. And it struck me when I was doing my tests for Majora's. I was using Death Mountain as a place to kind of test, from Ocarina of Time. I noticed that when when you first enter that area, the camera does not show that floor because you're looking from underneath. It's kind of on a plateau. So because the camera is looking up at the plateau, you don't see the top of the plateau. So presumably to conserve resources, they don't render that texture until you can see it. And even as you approach it, the game's camera is very careful to not peak the plateau. It actually moves automatically to not crest the plateau. So perhaps it is waiting to the very last minute to render that texture for performance reasons. There we go. And it seems to me the most likely explanation for why it's glitching out is that for some reason, because of the higher resolution, because of the way the camera sees more stuff at a time, when you scale the resolution up, perhaps it does not realize some flag is not being flipped to load that texture. It does not realize it's still being called out, right? It's still not being shown to conserve resources. I guess what I'm trying to say is that for some reason the game doesn't realize that you can see it. Yeah, exactly, Tonebox. I don't think that the cull point has changed. I think that perhaps the camera's position has changed somewhat. Like the way it's being read internally in the machine, like the camera's position is not in the precise spot it needs to be for the culling to be reversed. Right? So because the camera doesn't cross the right coordinate, then the graphics remain culled out, even though I can see them now. The game doesn't know that. Oh no. And I have that theory mostly because it seems like an awful weird coincidence that more than any other place in the game, as you approach Death Mountain, that plateau, the camera tries so hard to fight you so you can't see the top of the plateau. Right? Like it really is something you see at the very last minute, like right as you're jumping up basically to see it. And it seems to me that for some reason when you emulate the game, in fact, no, I know I said I was going to end the stream and I probably should. Some guys have already tuned out, but this is a good chance for us to actually go look at this issue. Let's close the content here and load Ocarina of Time. I'm going to leave this. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to not emulate CRT here in this case. I'm going to let the low-res, big, chunky, pixels show off here. But let's go, to Borte. And let's run to Death Mountain. I'll show you what I mean. This is what I did the other night when I was doing these tests to decide how I wanted to handle graphics in Majora's Mask. Whether it was worth it to keep using Glide. So again, this is the graphics as they would be seen on the inside of your N64. This is how they would look if you were able to magically plug an N64's graphics card directly into a modern display. You have the situation where you have these very low-res graphics, very low-detail graphics, and very sharp pixels. So you see there's a lot of blockiness here. And Glide plugin, which has the high-res graphics, so it allows you to see better textures and more clarity. It's not quite as compatible as this one is with N64's graphics hardware. And so there is a bug in this game where if you crest this hill, I'm going to demonstrate, the ground appears to not load in. It's totally invisible. And as Tonebox points out, again, I'm not an expert at this. There could be a lot of reasons why it doesn't seem to work. It could be something to do with the way the texture is supposed to be adhered to the surface. Maybe maybe it's just not in the right spot. Like Tonebox says, it could be that's not quite quote unquote thick enough. Couldn't just be maybe it's not resting in the right spot. It's not thick enough. It doesn't have enough enough leeway essentially to be seen under the situation where the upscaled graphics causes the positioning to be slightly off. But in any case, there's a texture up here that we can see normally on this plugin. This plugin is much more accurate. It should have no bugs in any game, which is awesome. So we can see games, perfectly as they appeared in the day. Look at this hill. You crest this hill, you run up here. I still can't see the floor. I still can't see it, still can't see it, still can't see it, still can't see it, and there's the floor. Right underneath my feet. Now, on the glide plugin, this texture, I believe, is called out even after you get up here. For some reason, it does not get called back in, quote unquote, right? It doesn't get restored. And culling is something that 3D consoles do to save memory so that they're not rendering things you can't see. In this case, I can see it, of course. I'm above it now. But if I'm not above it, if I'm down here, I certainly cannot see it. I can't see it now. I still can't see it. I still can't see it. Even now, I can't see it. Right? Again, the camera is not showing me the floor at all. If I climb this, even then, now I can finally see it. Right? Now, if I were to change our plugin to auto, which in this case is glide, and then close the content, change my video driver back to GL. We'll go to the same place, and you'll see that all the graphics are way sharper and allow us to see more detail, which is awesome. There's a bug where at least that texture, and according to Brian, more textures in Majora's Mask, don't load in. So this is how we played the whole game of Ocarina of Time. If you guys are watching on YouTube now, you'll know that we've completed a 100% playthrough of Ocarina of Time. If you guys are still watching on Twitch, you guys haven't passed out yet, you guys may or may not know that we recently completed this game. I'm pretty happy with how we did. Really fun. And it looked great in modern emulation, except for a couple of instances of some bugginess. And this is one of them. I'm doing this before I, end the stream, just as a way to demonstrate my argument that, from what I've seen in my testing, I'll bet you this bug is related to culling. So was that Deku upgrade, dude. Rest in peace. I want to carry more nuts. So on the whole, this game has been really accurately displayed. I've noticed some bugs. I noticed some texture bugs, like with there's a path, like a trail outside in the field that appears to be Z fighting with the floor. There's a bug where okay, there's this bug up here, of course. There's a bug with the camera in a certain room, a certain cave in the forest. But overall, it's been really accurate. I've been taking the bad with the good. Very little bad, but again, seeing the game this sharp has been easily worth it. As I've kind of demonstrated here, I hope tonight. It's kind of the idea of this rant, was to demonstrate, the advantage of upscaling old school 3D games. Never forget, KD. All right, so here's my example again, right? Up there is a texture I'm missing. I still can't see over that ledge. Right? Because the camera, the way it's working. I still can't, even right here, I can't see over the ledge. Climb this though, and nothing. That's the bug. If I look through here, I can see it. But here I can't. No texture. This is the only place in the game that's a problem. And I believe it's because of culling. For some reason, with this plugin, the camera doesn't realize I'm supposed to be able to see this texture. Because again, for the most part on this place, for the vast majority of the time, on this hill, you can't even see it. Cacao Man lead, not doing side jumps all the time. Boomer stream confirmed. Hell yeah, Boomer stream, dude. How it steps up, it's too thin now, huh? Maybe. It's weird that it only works here, and the only problem in this one area. COVID-19, nationwide riots, missed Deacon upgrade. Fuck this year, dude. It's been a hell of a year, guys. One last time, thank you. Look, it kind of spawned in there. If it settles in the right spot, it'll show it. Welcome back to Revenge. We're literally ending the stream right now. I've been trying to end it for a while, but I've had too much fun ranting. I see it now, but not when I'm on the ledge. Nor here, but if the camera rotates it just the right way, I can see it. That's really bizarre. It's a shame to hear that we're going to have to mess with different plugins. Look at that. See? Now I can see it. This is the stream that doesn't end. It just goes on and on, my friends.